Well, hello everybody, and thank you for joining us on this week 2 in the Capitol, by the way. The legislature's been here for 2 weeks. This is the third episode of The Advance. I'm Brandon Walton, Senior Editor at Texas Scorecard with Michael Quinn Sullivan. Looking ahead, looking at what's going to be happening in the Capitol over the next several days. There's quite a bit of stuff happening with the Senate. Of course, the State of the State address coming up. We're going to talk about that. But if you're talking about the Texas House, the story might actually be what's not happening this week.
Yeah, look, yesterday, it's called The Advance. We're trying to look forward, but, the future is always informed by the past. Yesterday, we saw House Speaker Dustin Burrows admit under questioning from state representatives Shelley Luther and Mike Alcott and Steve Toth some really revealing things about upcoming votes. Historically, you've had the Texas House adopt what's called the housekeeping resolution, in which they vote on things like the pay for the office budgets and things like that, allocating dollars for that. But yesterday, Speaker Burrows announced that House members wouldn't be able to vote on that. They're not going to be bringing it for the vote. Instead, his hand-picked committee chairman and that committee will decide how to spend the money without the members. This is unprecedented, to quote Briscoe Cain, who you talked to.
Yeah, absolutely. Briscoe Cain, representative who's sort of known for going back through the journals and finding these sort of things, was looking back through and couldn't find, he went back to 1961, couldn't find where these housekeeping resolutions weren't taken up. In fact, before, he actually went so far back that they didn't even call them housekeeping resolutions then, but they passed essentially the same thing as different resolutions, talking about pay, talking about, where members are going to park, all those sorts of things. Right. And on one hand, you're talking about, okay, maybe it's a small thing, talking about some of the administrative deals with the House. But on the other hand, it's a very big deal when you're talking about how this works in conjunction with the rules that were rammed through last week, where Democrat members are going to be vice chairs of committees, get additional power, and reportedly are going to receive a big office budget increase to compensate them for that. Normally, in any other session, they would have the opportunity to vote on that. Members could say, yes, we want to raise our office budgets, or yes, we want to give extra money to Democrat vice chairs. They didn't have that opportunity because the resolution, I should say, is not even being brought up for a vote. Speaker Dustin Burrows saying that, he essentially said that he recognizes that this isn't how it's been done in the past, but he doesn't care. He's going to move forward. They're not going to have a vote on it.
I know members that I've talked to, and I think some members you've talked to, have all kind of pointed to, and I've talked to folks kind of both pro-Burrows legislators and anti-Burrows legislators, if you will, and both of them are, and all of them are kind of saying this, both camps are saying the same kind of thing, that this does not necessarily portend well for the coming legislative session as you think about all the little things that members want to take votes on, either for their own records, for the records of their constituents, issues that they know might not pass, but they want to be able to inform the debate with. The fact that there's been no debate on the House rules, no debate, and now no vote on the housekeeping, has some of these members kind of starting to ask some questions like, what did we sign up for this legislative session, and how necessary are we to the governance of the state at this point?
No, exactly. I mean, members have not, essentially throughout this process since the speaker was elected a couple weeks ago, have not really had the opportunity to do much legislating themselves. Because as you pointed out, the House rules last week, they weren't allowed to bring up any amendments. And then with this housekeeping resolution, they've not been allowed to actually pass it or discuss it. And so what does that mean for, the future of the session? I will say that Speaker Burrows mentioned that committee preference cards, these are essentially, members are given literally postcard size thing where they can say essentially what committees they want to serve on. Those are going to be due to his office on Wednesday, so tomorrow, meaning that when he actually announces committees, then the next process is he assigns committee chairs, assigns who's going to serve on which committees, and that'll be the next step in the process. If he says he wants to move quickly on it, maybe we see them within the next week or so. Probably more likely, looking at how these have historically worked, it'll probably be 2 or 3 weeks until we actually see those committee assignments announced in the House, compared to the Senate, where we had them within, I think, 3 or 4 days of the session.
Yeah, and look, I think historically you have found in most sessions, the Texas House has had committees, had committee chairs, all those things set at least by the end of January. We're now at the end of January. The 1st of February is on Saturday, which means you're not going to have any House committees. And the importance here, I know for some folks thinking, oh my gosh, who cares about committees and committee chairs? Well, that's how the legislation gets done. And so if you don't have committees and you don't have committee chairs, that means you don't have legislation, don't have legislative hearings, you don't have all those kind of little things that have to happen procedurally to move legislation to the floor, all of which kind of feels like slow rolling. They adopted yesterday a resolution calling for themselves to have a 5-day weekend starting tomorrow on Wednesday. So that's again a significant kind of red flag for a number of folks. So we've been talking a lot about that side of the Capitol.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this side of the Capitol, the Texas Senate.
Yeah.
Later this morning, the Texas Senate is actually beginning hearings. You were starting to say about the committees in the Senate having been formed. Brandon Creighton, who chairs the Committee on Education K-16, that's both elementary school, junior high, high school, and college. Brandon Creighton is having a hearing today on school choice and expected to draw a fairly large crowd of both supportive and opposed to the issue.
Well, I would expect that you'll see a lot of people come in for this hearing. This is just the first hearing that they're having on school choice this session. Not really clear whether or not they're going to actually move, necessarily the bill out of committee. I expect that you'll probably see some more deliberation on it. We'll probably see future committee hearings on school choice in the Senate. Right. But they're getting started today. That's, I think, it's a word we keep using, but it might be unprecedented too, that we're actually having an actual piece of legislation being discussed this early in the session, in the Senate committee, and just underscoring the fact that I think Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has been very clear that he wants to move very quickly. He's been challenging the House to do the same. He wants to move quickly on the conservative priorities. And in this window, this first 60 days of the session, right, where the Constitution only allows them to vote on bills that the governor deems an emergency priority, school choice, certainly something that's probably going to make that list whenever the governor has his State of the State address on Sunday.
Yeah, and again, that's the next significant thing on the calendar as we look at the week ahead, is the governor's State of the State address coming on Sunday evening. This, again, talk about, this isn't exactly unprecedented, but it certainly is shifting earlier. 2023, Governor Abbott held his State of the State address on the 38th legislative day. This year he's having it on the 20th legislative day, and that State of the State address, Brandon, is where the governor lays out his not only his vision legislatively for the state, but he names significantly those emergency issues. So that technically, the governor on Sunday evening can transmit to the speaker and to the lieutenant governor his priority, his emergency items, and on Monday they can start passing legislation. The Texas Senate is organized in a way that they could start doing that. Again, the Texas House, even if the governor says, these are my emergencies, I want these handled immediately, the Texas House can't do anything about it until they have committees.
Right, because they need committees, and then those committees take a little bit of time to organize and get ready, especially when you have new committee chairman and new vice chairman. And so you could be looking at weeks where the Texas House doesn't address these priorities. That would certainly be in line with what we've seen in the past, where at least looking at the last session, the House didn't pass any of these address any of the governor's emergency items during that 60-day period, essentially ruling it sort of void, right? It actually wasn't useful on the House side, whereas the Senate side did move quickly on those.
Yeah, so this week I expect you're going to continue to see things moving, at least the processes moving within the Texas House, in the Texas Senate, in the Texas House. Obviously, a different story. They're not even going to be meeting for the rest of the week. So it's, I think for a number of folks who are concerned about the pacing of the session, and again, you and I have talked about this both offline, talked about it previously, but the juxtaposition between what's happening in Washington, D.C. and what's happening in Austin could not be more striking. You have the President of the United States issuing executive order after executive order, moving forward with his agenda. Meanwhile, in Texas, you've got the Texas House essentially currently slow rolling the agenda of the grassroots. For all you lawmakers out there, good luck.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to be signing off here from the Texas Capitol. Thanks for joining us on this edition of The Advance. We will see you next Tuesday at 9 a.m. Maybe we'll be in the Capitol, maybe we'll be outside the Capitol, maybe we'll be somewhere else entirely. Don't know. But wherever we are, we look forward to seeing you then. Have a great Tuesday.